Welcome to this fourth edition of the national conversation on the elections of 2027. Thank you for being part of this journey. For those who have not subscribed, please subscribe, then like and share. In this series, we are trying to look at the main players who will have an impact on the 2027 elections. We began by looking at Matiangi and Kalonzo. We then looked at Uhuru and Gachagua. Last week, we looked at Natembeya and Eugene Wamalwa. Today, I take the challenge from a friend of mine, an eminent personality in this country, Amos, who told me, you have looked at Matiangi and Kalonzo. Why don't you look at who, between the two, will have the capacity, the will to fight corruption more than the other? And who between that Kalonzo and Matiangi will find favor with the GenZs? It's quite a big challenge. One, because we live in a country where it would appear to many people corruption and theft is in our DNA. It's a very sad state of affairs. I remember President Uhuru once, I think he was in Israel, and he alluded to this fact that seems corruption and us are one and the same. At some point in a press briefing at State House, munataka nifanye nini? So it means that you are looking at who can fight corruption in a country where almost everybody has a bad past. Be that as it may, we'll attempt to see between Kalonzo and Matiangi when it comes to corruption. When it comes to who between the two will find favor with the GenZs, because the GenZs are going to be central in the elections of 2027. I will want to rope in other players, notably Natembeya, for obvious reasons. But before that, like I've said, please, if you have not subscribed, please do so to support us. We also urge you to advertise with us if you have something to say. We live in a world today where you cannot be selling your products and services the way you'd sell mandazi. You need to reach out to the potential customers. We have the vitals. We have the statistics. If you look at our analytics, we have the numbers. We have the demography. If you are selling a house, even as an individual, we are better than the broker you'll give the house to. We'll do it faster, in a more reliable way, and they will take much less than the brokers. So back to Matiangi and Kalonzo. Between the two, who is best placed to fight corruption? Corruption in the Kenyan sense is merely theft. So Kalonzo is a man of God. I think Kalonzo would be more of a man of God than Rigathi Gachagua. He's prayerful, he's humble, a humble servant of God. The humility would convince us that between Matiangi and Kalonzo will be a better placed person, a person better placed to fight corruption. Yes, there are issues that have been mentioned about Matiangi. I have said I leave it to Matiangi to explain to the people of Kenya matters of Ruaraka land and other issues. But issues have been mentioned about Matiangi. So again, if you are going by who between the two has a past that denies him the pedestal, the ground on which to stand while fighting corruption, you'll find issues with Matiangi. You can't say that of Kalonzo Musyoka. In his many years of service to this country, of the many years of political existence in this country, spanning from as early as 1985 or thereabouts, Kalonzo has not been caught up in any scandal I know of. There has been some slight mention of the Yatta land, but really nothing major. You cannot find Kalonzo being mentioned when corruption of big dollars, the big bucks, is being talked about in this country. Something you'll be very hard placed to talk about another Kenyan. So between the two, my friend who asked this question, on the face of it, Kalonzo looks like he doesn't have baggage. And unless I'm also wrong, he's not a poor man. But he doesn't have obscene riches. The problem I've always had with the people who say they are clean, I always look at how much they have. And I've said, how can you convince me, a humble person, you are not Chandaria, you are not Chris Kirubi, you are not an industrialist. How do you have the billions you have? So I doubt that Kalonzo also has he's a rich man, I know, but I doubt that he has the billions, the obscene figures that people have. So on that score, again, I'm not saying Matiangi has billions. I'm only saying I don't know about Matiangi in terms of how rich he is, whether he has the billions people have talked about or not. So if you in that score, Kalonzo seems the person you would trust to fight corruption. In 2027, if you are looking at somebody who can fight corruption, Kalonzo. But then there are also questions, which we must not run away from. Is it enough for you to be clean? I doubt that that is enough. It's good, but it's not enough. You need to be tough. Mwana Lutia, he used to say, tougher still. Kwendo Panga. You need to be tough to fight corruption, because corruption fights back. These thieves, ask anybody who has tried to clean the tea sector. Ask Gachagua, trying to clean the coffee sector. They fight back, and they have the dollars. They have the influence. They have the connections. Fighting theft in this country, what we call corruption, require a tough man. A person who can face the cartels and break those cartels. When you look at corruption in that manner, my friend Amos, then you begin to see Matiangi can do better than Kalonzo. Because we are looking at a man or woman who land in State House and the thieves are trembling. Tell me, between Kalonzo and Matiangi, who would land in State House and the cartels are shaking and trembling? I think it's Matiangi. And that's how I now bring in Natembeya. That another individual in this country who can face the thieves, the corruption cartels in this country, and face them head on, is another guy called George Natembeya. So on the front of corruption, and if you're looking at a presidential candidate who is tough enough to take the risk and fight the thieves in this country, then you are looking at Matiangi and George Natembeya. That now lands me on the matters of GenZ. The GenZ in this country, from last year, during the revolution of June. The Gen Zs have been heard to mention Matiangi's name more than any other name. And I think it's not for nothing. I think the Gen Zs are under no illusion that the job ahead is easy. They know the job of dismantling the old structures, the job of dismantling the old system in order to create a better Kenya is not for the faint-hearted. And that's why between Kalonzo, Matiangi, certainly the Gen Zs have left no doubt that they would prefer Matiangi. Not to say that either they will not find one of their own or that there will be no better Kenyan. But in terms of the established names that have been floated around, the Gen Zs have mentioned Tata and Matiangi more than any other name. So on that score again, Matiangi does much better than Kalonzo. Matiangi is then again joined by Natembeya. Natembeya is proving to be a no-nonsense leader. A man who can look at power in the eyes. A man capable of taking risks. And that may, once he declares, if he's going to declare, I haven't talked to him about that. Once Natembeya declares, in the event he does declare, I think he will join Matiangi and be one of the people the Gen Zs may consider for leadership of this country in 2027. On account of toughness, proven toughness. Natembeya is not just proving now he's tough, defying the big boys, looking power in the eyes, demolishing Wetangula and Mudavadi on the ground, and taking the recent arrest and the humiliation in his stride, as evidenced by his speeches when he landed in Kisumu and traversed the western region from Vihiga all the way to Trans Nzoia Kitale. That defiance is what the Gen Zs will be looking for. But beyond the recent toughness, Natembeya has shown great toughness when he was in the provincial administration. DO, DC, regional, whatever they are called, regional commissioners or whatever they are called, dealing with a tough Mao issue and being very unpopular, but standing his ground on the Mao issue. Facing politicians in the Mao region and telling them off. Not many people will do that. Because some of those politicians were very influential politicians. As regional commissioner for Rift Valley, he was the far front of fighting the bandits in the North Rift region. And therefore, he's a tough guy. And I feel and think when it comes to the Gen Z issue, I'm not looking beyond Matiangi and Natembeya in terms of who the Gen Z may find more attractive. And I'm leaving room for another person to emerge. I'm not ignoring Tata also. And I'm not oblivious to the fact that the Gen Zs may say enough is enough. These old geezers have destroyed this country. We're not going to trust any of them. And they go for it. And they won't be the first people. They won't be the first people of a type of their generation to take up leadership. History is full of those where young people have taken up leadership of their countries and kingdoms and empires. It's possible. I do know, however, that the Gen Zs are educated young men and women, reasonable young men and women. They know what they can do. They know what is difficult. They know what is hard. They know what is impossible. And they know what is practical. And they can be pragmatic. For that reason, I believe the more practical thing they would go for is to support an individual to midwife the change. Because as sure as day follows night, as sure as today will lead to tomorrow, there's going to be a generational change in this country. The young people, young men and women, our children and grandchildren will take up the leadership of this country. There are no two ways about it. So that 2027 is merely the transition we missed in 2022. The year 2022, the elections of 2022 was a transition period. Generational change, but we missed it. I doubt that we will miss it in 2027. I'm more than convinced, come 2027, there is a crop of politicians supported by Gen Zs who are going to midwife the change and the transition to a new Kenya led by new Kenyans, young Kenyans, new vision, new thinking, new ideas, to bring the sort of paradigm shift that will change this country forever. It is sad, but it's a fact. It's a reality, an uncomfortable reality, that the people of my generation have destroyed this country. The people of my generation are incapable of imagining a new Kenya. They are trapped in the past. They are comfortable in the known. They cannot risk. Yet, to save this country from decay, we need a crop of leaders, a new generation of leaders that will take the risk, bust the thing, and create a new Kenya. That cannot be done by these politicians around. None of them. I only feel and believe that the Gen Zs will use their power to select from these people a team of men and women with clear instructions to midwife the change before the Gen Zs take over and the millennials in the year 2032. 37. In the elections of 2032 and 2037, I will be surprised, and I hope I'll be around. God give me some life. If you are a politician in your 50s and 60s, and you are working towards leading this country in 2037, 2032, please think about keeping cattle, rearing goats, looking after chicken. If you look at the parliament after the elections of 2032, if you look at parliament, anybody beyond 40 will be very old. That parliament of 2032, 2037, the average age will be 28, 27. When you are there and you are 50, you look like a grandfather. That's the Kenya we are going into. And that is the Kenya that Gen Zs will help to midwife by selecting from these men I'm looking at in this series, so that in future, a president of this country being 35 and 40 will be a very common thing. It's already happening across the globe. Noticeably, you see gender, you look at European cabinets in Europe, European countries, Australia, New Zealand, you see the strong presence of women and young people in leadership, in parliament, in cabinet. That is with us in Kenya here. So the question is, who will the Gen Zs trust to midwife, to transition this country from the old to the new? Because the old, the men and women of status quo, would not let go. They are like Pharaoh. Pharaoh, let my people be. If you've read the Bible, it was not easy for Pharaoh to let the people go. The old generation of politicians, you can name them. They form a system. They form a club. And when the time comes to protect each other, they will protect each other because they are protecting the club. They are protecting club interests. This country has been led by members of a club. They don't like outsiders. Young people remain future leaders. Today you are future leaders. Tomorrow you are future leaders. Next 10 years you are future leaders. Why? The club is protective. They ring fence their club. And because it's not easy for them to let go, I am sure the Gen Z will have a choice. And the choice of who to midwife the change, to transition before they take over, will be limited to who among these candidates has the guts to face these people as they resist change, to dismantle the old order and hand over to the new generation. Looked at it in that manner, my friend Amos, you are left with only two choices: George Natembeya and Fred Matiangi.